Now, one of my favorite types of garments is a V-neck top. They're comfortable and easy to put on, and they look great. But we can make them look even better by adding what is called an edging, like what I have here, which has an edging placket. This edging placket could be as wide or as narrow as you like and done in many different ways. So if you'd like to add this type of edging and detail to your next project, stick with me. I'm going to show you how to draft the pattern, how to calculate the size of the V-neck opening so that you get your desired width, and how to draft a simple collar that fits just right. Now let's start with the pattern. First, start by tracing off your front and back bodice sloper block. If you don't have one, feel free to check out my video on how to draft a bodice sloper. I'll also drop it in the comments below. I like to start with a guideline to place my sloper on. This helped me to keep everything aligned, and then I'll just trace it all the way around. Notice that this top is designed to have a lot of room under the arm. And if you notice here, I did a drastic drop shoulder. You don't have to do that. You can just stick with the set-in sleeve. That's me just doing a little bit of something extra. I'm going to go back to my armhole dart and adjust it so that it measures 1/2 of an inch and make a mark. Now from my side seam, I'm going to measure out 3/4 of an inch and make a mark. Then I'm going to measure down 3/4 of an inch and make a mark. And that's going to be my guide for my armhole. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my curve ruler and complete my armhole. Next, I'm going to go ahead and complete my side seam. I'm going to make sure that my seams are always at a right angle. That's important. Always make sure you have a right angle. Okay, so since I moved my armhole dart 1/2 of an inch, I need to move my shoulder 1/2 of an inch. My original shoulder length was 5 inches. Therefore, from my neck, I want to measure in 1/2 of that, which is 2.5 inches. And I'm going to make a mark. Now I'm going to draw my diagonal line for my V-neck and make sure that it touches this line. Now just go ahead and square out. Make sure it's nice and square. Next, I want to make my placket 3.5 inches wide. Since my opening is 3 inches, that's what I'm shooting for. And I also want to make sure my placket is a little bit longer. So I'm going to make it 17 inches. That gives me some wiggle room, something to work with. Now the next thing I want to do is measure my original neckline and then transfer that measurement onto my placket. I want to do that so that it doesn't extend past this line. Next, I'm going to extend the length of my pattern from my waist to my desired length. And for me, that's about 7 inches. Yours may be different. Next, I'm going to trace off my placket. Now I want to trace the whole rectangle. But first, I'm going to draw a grain line. Grab another piece of paper just the size of the rectangle and go ahead and grab a pinwheel. We need this so that we can trace. Now that we've traced, we just want to go ahead and draw in the rectangle and the neckline. Add markings, add all of the markings and instructions that's needed. Remember, do not cut the placket neckline or add any seam allowances at this point, not just yet. All right, for the front bodice, I'm going to cut one on the fold. Cut one on the fold. Add seam allowance to my shoulder, armhole, and side seam. Okay guys, so we're just going to do a little bit of math. It's very simple. We are going to add, subtract, and divide. So add, subtract, and divide. So what does that mean? We want to sew a 1-inch placket onto our bodice. So this would be my bodice, and I want to sew a 1-inch placket onto the V-neck portion of my bodice. So I am going to add a 1/4-inch seam allowance. So this is the add part of our equation. So our 1-inch placket plus a 1/4 inch. So now we have a placket that's 1 1/4 of an inch. Now we want to subtract. So we have 1 inch. We need to subtract a 1/4 inch from that 1 inch. And that's going to be how far in we want to make our cut, because we need to have some place to put our placket, right? So we are going to come in a certain amount. So what is that? 1 inch minus a 1/4 inch is 3/4 of an inch. So we want to have an opening for our placket that is 3/4 of an inch divided by 2. So 3/4 of an inch divided by 2, what is that going to be? It's going to give us 3/8 of an inch. This would be the fabric folded. This is going to be the raw edge. This is our bodice. Remember, we place it on the fold. So we want to go in 3/8 of an inch from the folded edge. Don't get worried. We're going to make sure that our 1-inch placket fits inside that line. And then we have our shoulder up here, and we want to draw our diagonal to meet that portion. So I'm just going to draw in the diagonal. So what did we do? We added a 1/4 of an inch, right? We to our 1 inch. We started with 1 inch. We added a 1/4 of an inch because that's going to be our seam allowance. Now we need to calculate how far in from our folded edge that we need to go in. And we said we need to subtract a 1/4 inch from our 1 inch, gives us 3 1/4 of an inch. We need to divide that by 2, which gives us 3/8 of an inch. The reason why we divide it by 2 is because it's on the fold. 1, 2. So that's pretty much the calculation. Now I just want to show you really quick how this works. So we have a 1-inch placket. This is our opening. I have an opening, but remember this opening is only 3/4 of an inch, right? So what does that mean for us? When we add back our 1/4 of an inch, which is our seam allowance, over here, and we add our 1/4 of an inch seam allowance back over here, we are going to have an opening of 1 inch. And I'm going to cut that so you can see. And of course that's going to get folded under. So this is our seam allowance, which is going to be seamed here. And this is our other seam allowance, but as you can see, our placket fits nice and snug right inside. Okay? Perfectly. Next, I'm going to trace off my back bodice. I need to make sure that I leave a little room at the bottom to lengthen my pattern, just like I did for the front, 7 inches for me. Let's start by making a guideline. And since I added room to my front bodice, I'm going to do the same for the back. So I'm going to go up a 1/2 inch on the shoulder and out 3/4 of an inch on the side seam. And then just trace the armhole. I like to square everything off and make sure it's even. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the seam allowances. But before I do, I need to take a measurement. And that's going to be my neck measurement. So I need to take my placket pattern and fold it along the shoulder line. Remember, there's no seam allowance yet. So I'm matching the seam line and the neckline. And for me, I'm just going to go ahead and tape it down and measure the length of the necks, both the back and the front. Alright, so here's my back bodice. This is the center back. I have a mark here because I'm going to add a slip. I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a 1/4 inch seam allowance for the neck. For the back bodice, I am also cutting one piece on the fold, just like the front. Okay, so here I have a rectangle that I drafted for my collar, and this is based on the length that I needed my collar to be. Remember, we measured that. I got the length by measuring my back neck and my front neck together. On my placket, I need my neck seam allowance to be 1/4 of an inch, to make an accurate measurement, and that's going to be half the length of my collar. And then I need to double that number, and that's going to be the length of my rectangle. But for me, I added a few more inches so that I could have a little more space to work with. So the width is 4 inches. And I'm going to draft the collar on only this section, not here or here, just right here. So here's the section that we're working on. Go ahead and fold it nice and tight. Now we're going to make some markings from the fold down to the opening of the collar. So this is the part that opens. This is the section that you are going to sew to your bodice. This is the collar top. Start by measuring down along the center fold. From the top, measure down 3 3/4 of an inch and make a mark. Now along the top fold, I'm going to measure across 10 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so I have a mark here and I have a mark here. Next, I'm going to measure along the open edge of my collar 9 1/2 inches over and make a mark. Now remember, these are my measurements, yours may be different. Now I need to make a mark that indicates my shoulder seam. Now if you don't remember that, just go ahead and grab your bodice and take that measurement. Mine is 4 1/4. So I'm going to measure from the center fold over 4 1/4 and make a mark. Alright, once I have all of my marks, I can now take the ruler and connect the dots. Now if you want, you can take a curved ruler and connect the dots here. But first, I would connect these 2 dots from here to here with a straight ruler, then use a curved ruler for the rest of the way. I'm going to use a piece of tape for stability and then take my pinwheel and trace. Alright, so when you open it up, you have your dots on this side. You can feel them. Now all you have to do is trace it out. Now this piece is also placed on the fold, and we cut 1 fabric and 1 interfacing. Alright, so as a reminder, I want to remind you to cut your collar in a rectangle first. We're going to cut it out after we fuse it with the interfacing. So I cut 1 collar and 1 interfacing. And the same thing for the placket, but I cut 2 plackets and 2 interfacings. 1, 2. Okay, so 1 for each. One for each. So again, only the rectangle. Okay, so you have your fashion fabric, the interfacing, and you have your pattern for your neck placket. You're going to pin your neck placket to your fabric on the right side, and you're going to now cut out your pattern. For your collar, it's a little different. You are going to have the interfacing facing up, and you are going to have your fabric together. Okay, make sure the right sides are together. You're going to put your collar pattern that you created onto your fold, and you are going to cut out your collar. Make sure that you put notches to give you an indication of where the shoulder, your center fold is. All right. Okay, as a reminder, we are cutting our neck, V-neck placket on the right side. So I already cut mine out, and the interfacing is on the inside. It's a different type of interfacing. It's a heat bond, so it's a peel off, and it leaves this beautiful stretchable interfacing. So right side for the V-neck placket, you're cutting your pattern on the wrong side of the collar. So fold the collar with right sides together, and then you're going to cut your pattern out on the wrong side. All right,